Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to get started here in a few minutes while we'll give people a little bit to sign on and then we'll get started.
Be back in 2 seconds.
Good, you came back, Jerry. I can do a financial aid presentation off the cuff, I'm sure. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We just have people still trickling in, so we will get started here in just a couple minutes. Okay, well, I think we will get started now. I'm sure some people will keep joining us. Just some housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the presentation tonight, go ahead and use the Q&A box. The three of us who are not presenting will be monitoring the question and answers, and anything we're unable to get to, we will catch up with Jerry at the end and ask him if he can answer those questions. I'm Becky Bolito. I'm the post-secondary counselor at Vernon Hills High School.
I'm Erin Murphy, post-secondary high school at Libertyville High School.
And I'm Bianca Novacek, the college and career counselor at Carmel Catholic High School.
All right, and tonight we have Jerry Cebrzynki from Lake Forest College, who is the financial aid guru. And we are very lucky that he saved this time slot for us to be able to tell our families more about financial aid in the general sense and some of the more specific stuff. It is not necessarily the most exciting topic, but Jerry does it in a entertaining and also digestible way. So Jerry, with no further ado, if you just want to tell people more about yourself, and then we will sign off and return when you are done.
Sounds good. Thanks for inviting me. First of all, I appreciate you doing that, and partially because I love what I do. I love sharing this, well, as Becky called it, kind of digestible and exciting and sexy world of college costs and financial aid and stuff. So a little bit of my background: I have been in the profession of financial aid specifically, and admission and student affairs for 40 years. It'll be 40 years, and oh my God, it's 40 years this month. So I've been at Lake Forest for 30 years. I was at DePaul University before that for 10 years. So what I want to do is kind of share this information about college costs, about financial aid. Again, as Becky mentioned, I'll go through my slides, which will take 45 minutes or so, and then we'll answer any and all questions that you have. Some of the best part, I feel like, when I do these programs is the Q&A, because I could talk forever. But it's interesting and more important for me to know what's on your mind, what's important to you. No question will be left unanswered, tonight, hopefully. So that said, I'm going to share my screen so I can do my PowerPoint. And hopefully you can see it. Obviously the topic is just really about paying for college, understanding the process as it syncs up with the admission process as well. And as we go through this process, as guidance counselors, as college counselors, as financial aid professionals, as admission professionals, we talk a lot to students about finding a good fit for them in terms of a college, academically, socially, demographically, so many reasons. But we can't ignore that we have to find a good fit financially for the family as well. Like as we talk to students about safety schools and reach schools, kind of the same thing. And what will happen tonight when we're all said and done is you will be pleasantly surprised and optimistic and encouraged by the information that I share with you, and excited by it too. I know I can just already sense that because there's so many things that we'll cover in this short amount of time, but everything from really the real cost of college, what families are actually paying out of pocket, what financial aid is when we talk about financial aid, when we lapse into our acronyms and our financial aid speak. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The financial aid and the scholarship, applications throughout the process, the offers that you get, both admissions and merit-based scholarships and financial aid and the grants and student loans and work study, how to compare those offers, because we'll notice that they can look very different from school to school. So a couple places online where you can literally plug in some information and compare apples to apples. Deadlines are huge these days. We've moved away from soft priority deadlines to more drop dead dates. And so we'll talk about that. And then finally, where to find help, all along the way. You've got some absolutely spectacular resources, at all three schools, represented here tonight. The very first topic that we are talking about more than ever before is college affordable these days? And it's in the news a lot. Congress is talking about it. The White House is talking about it. And I think you will be pleasantly surprised to find that it is affordable. In fact, it's more affordable than it has ever been. A lot of it is perception. I'm a huge believer in perception is reality. I like this graphic, which is why I kind of folded it in here. But truly, throughout the process, the statistics say that 8 out of 10 families will not pursue any of the financial aid process or any of the admission process because they think schools are too expensive, because they focus on the sticker price. This isn't, new. I mean, certainly we've been talking about this topic, about college costs, for a while. The New York Times in particular likes to write articles about it. Everything from colleges have begun to price themselves out of the American dream down to, if we go on this way for another 25 years, it's not going to be an affordable system. The interesting thing is this has been talked about for the last 50 years. And in fact, there's an article that just came out, last month about the college pricing game in the New York Times. If you have a chance, kind of view that. It's more of a podcast than an article. But when all is said and done, I really want us to not be Chicken Littles. And I hope you get that reference. I hope that makes sense. But the sky is not falling. I mean, there really are lots of options out there. And truly, I go back to that previous slide. College is affordable. It's actually more affordable than it's ever been. Because when we talk about the real cost of college, we have to keep in mind that so many students receive financial help to help them with the sticker price. 85% of all college students, of all first-year students enrolled today, everywhere across the country, 2-year, 4-year, public, private, get some type of financial aid. That's 95% at private colleges. Some private colleges, 99, 100%, 80% at public universities and community colleges. And of the help that families are receiving, with the cost, 2/3 of it is in the form of what we call the gift aid, the free money, the grant, the scholarship, not paid back, no strings attached for the most part. So I'm very passionate about this. And so I will tell every family that I ever talk to, every program that I do, that if you have one iota of concern about the cost, go through the entire process, which you've already done by just kind of logging in tonight, because you will be pleasantly surprised with the results. Putting costs in perspective, at a public 4-year university these days, tuition fees, room and board are averaging about $27,000. But even that's on the low side for a lot of the publics, a lot of the flagship universities. University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, tuition fees, room and board is approaching $40,000 a year. On the other end of the spectrum are the private colleges and universities, where on average it's about $56,000, but there are over 1,000 colleges whose costs exceed $65,000 a year. 500 exceed $70,000 a year. But I go back to that previous slide saying very, very few people are paying $70,000 or $27,000 or $40,000. It's kind of an example of some of the high, well, I'm changing the language here. I'm taking it upon myself, this movement to get away from calling these high cost colleges to really more high price colleges, because this truly is not what families are paying. The sticker price at Notre Dame is about $80,000, Northwestern $84,000, University of Southern California $82,000, the most expensive college in the country today. And these costs, by the way, these prices are actually a little bit dated because we haven't gotten the most up-to-date information from a lot of the schools. But the most expensive college is the University of Chicago at $85,000 a year. I would be remiss if I didn't kind of slide Lake Forest into the conversation at a bargain at only $68,000 a year. But the net cost to a family, when all is said and done, when we look at the 85%, the 95% of private colleges, families, with kids at Notre Dame are not paying, $80,000. On average, they might be paying $30,000. At University of Chicago, they might be paying $34,000. And the definition of net cost is tuition and fees, room and board, meals, housing, minus just the gift aid, not the student loans, not work study, just the grants and the scholarships. I love this website, and I use it all the time, collegecost.ed.gov. Every one of these pictures is a link to another website, two in particular, College Navigator, which I use a lot when talking to families, gives you kind of an upfront sense of that college. I use it when I'm talking to a family and we're talking about another college and I'm not like super familiar with it. This will give you an idea of what kind of school it is, where they're located, lots of different categories you can explore. I've got screenshots that I'll show you in just a little bit. The other link on this page is the College Scorecard. Relatively new. It's been in existence for the last 4 or 5 years. But this is more of the back end, the outcomes of how well the colleges are performing. So, taking a look at the Navigator, kind of the upfront information about the college, and the scorecard, how well they're doing, gives you a really good, robust, kind of well-rounded picture of that particular college. Here's a screenshot of the College Navigator. Of course, it just happened to use Lake Forest College as an example, but kind of shows you where we're located. All of those different categories on the bottom give you a lot more detailed information about that particular category, whether it's general information or admissions or retention or varsity athletic teams or public safety. When you drill down into these categories, and in this example, I used DePaul University. When you drill down into the financial aid section, this is where you'll get a sense of how many students at DePaul are receiving financial aid. And here, of their first year class, 99% of the students received something to help them with the cost. As you kind of look down a little bit more, you'll see how many got federal grants, how many got state grants, and then about halfway down, how many got something from the university itself, $22,000, $23,000. This gives you a sense of, it's not the sticker price to focus on. It is really more of the what might you expect to receive to make it more affordable for you. You can drill down into another category that's called net price. Of course, I call it net cost. And I have this feeling that if I keep talking about that, and I'll give you an example later on in this session, but if I keep calling it net cost, that's what it's going to be called. Eventually we'll see. But in this category, you can see where on average over a few year period of time, what families have paid, what their actual net cost was after the grants, after the scholarships. And again, this is tuition fees, room and board. At DePaul, the tuition fees, room and board costs are a little over $60,000. The nice thing about this, College Navigator, is that it gives you kind of this 3-year average. That we're in the midst right now of supplying this information to the Department of Ed, who can populate this website. So within about 6 weeks, the 2018-19 school year will drop off, and then you'll see the 21-22 data on there as well. And then at the bottom, it gives you some kind of income bands where, depending on where you fall, it might give you some idea, some ballpark idea. The scorecard is really nice because it tells you how well the college is performing with their, not, a lot of the information kind of overlaps with the Navigator, but a lot is very specific to just the scorecard, like the student loan default rates or the average, the employment. If students get a job, you know, within a couple of years after graduating, what their earnings potential are. It's a very interactive tool. I mean, if we had more time tonight, I would show you a lot more screenshots, but you can go into so many different categories that say, show me a school that is located in a large city that has a 95% 5-year graduation rate, where at least, you know, $30,000 is available in gifts and in gift aid and grants and scholarships, and has a degree in archaeology. And then you'll see all of the schools that match those criteria for you. So many more. You can do faith-based, you can do, there's a category, they renamed a category this year. And it's a word that I've never used before. And I'm like, okay, it's interesting. Now I have to use it. It's called urbanicity. It's about where the school is located. They talk about large cities or rural or suburban or very rural. So just doesn't take much to amuse us in a financial aid office. When you look into the scorecard and plug in the name of the school, this is one of the things that you'll see. Now, I just happened to be talking to a friend of mine who has a daughter who's a senior, and we were talking about Arcadia University, particularly because of the study abroad programs. They're really well known for their study abroad programs. If you plugged in Arcadia, this is where you see they're located in Glenside, Pennsylvania. They're Presbyterian Church affiliated. This is the kind of the screenshot you'd see of some of their data, their graduation rate. And the definition of graduation rate, by the way, what is defined and what colleges report is slightly different. For some unknown reason, there's a movement to define graduation rate as more of a 7-year graduation rate. But most colleges will define it as a 5-year graduation rate. So a lot of the data that you'll see will be more of the 5-year. The average annual cost, that's that net cost. The median earnings, you know, $52,000 for those students who got a job within a couple of years after graduating from Arcadia. If this were a Lake Forest College example, that median earnings would be like 70,000, but I'm just saying, just throwing that out there. And then these are the different categories that you can drill down and get a lot more detailed information. On every college's website, there is something called it's called a net price calculator. Of course, I'm calling it the net cost calculator. It allows you to plug in a little bit of information about where your student is coming from academically, where the family is coming from financially, to get a better sense of, rather than just looking at the scorecard or the Navigator kind of averages, more based on your situation, where you're coming from. It's not an application, it's not a promise or a guarantee, but it's a really, really good starting point. And it's a great recruitment tool for a lot of colleges because they use it to show you how generous they are. So yeah, a school like Notre Dame, you know, sticker price might be $80,000, but on the net cost calculator, you might see that your child would qualify for a $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000, you know, grant or scholarship from Notre Dame or any of those schools. And I want to mention too that I kind of just show those high price, you know, schools up front, but the net cost, the generosity of a lot of the colleges runs the gamut, not only from those that cost $80,000, but from those that cost $50,000 or $60,000. One of the things you'll notice about this calculator is that it comes in many shapes and sizes, lots of bells and whistles and pretty pie charts on some. Others are pretty bare bones, but ultimately it comes down to the same bottom line as answers the question, how much would it or might it cost you to send your son or daughter to that particular college? So when we talk about financial aid, when we lapse into our language, when it's a part of any conversation, financial aid is anything and everything that has a dollar amount attached to it that is offered to the family to help them with the cost, with the sticker price, whether it's a scholarship or grant, the gift aid, or what we call self-help, student loans, work study. It's a combination of all of this that makes up the financial aid offered to the family. Coming from a variety of sources, the federal government with the federal grant and student loan and work study programs. Every state has a grant program. Here in Illinois, there's an agency called the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and they administer two things. One, a state grant that has a value of $7,200. And that was recently increased by $1,700 over last year. Just this past summer, it went up by $1,700. If a student, graduates from an Illinois high school and attends an Illinois college or university, and they fill out the financial aid forms, they are automatically considered for this. It's called the MAP grant, the Monetary Award Program grant. The other thing that students can pursue that are based here in Illinois are scholarships, particularly for students who are interested in going into the teaching profession. And it doesn't mean they have to declare a major or take classes as early as their first year in college. If there's any inkling of they might be going into teaching, they can apply for one of these teacher scholarships, which also has a value of about $7,000. Colleges and universities are the primary source of financial aid when all is said and done. It's not unusual if 75% of the offer is coming from the college itself. The rest is coming from these other sources, including outside scholarships, if we know about them, or employers. More in the last 5 years and in the last 40 years, I've seen more employers offer as part of their benefits package small grants or small scholarships to dependents of its employees. So whether it's something you know about or something you can inquire with HR, absolutely worth your effort to do so. Private sources, outside scholarships, a huge source, and something I'm also very passionate about. And I have to be careful in my profession, or maybe it's just me, but when I'm very passionate about something, my mantra is there is no horse too dead to beat. So I will talk about it. I'll get on my soapbox. I'll talk till blue in the face, but really I would love more students to take advantage of some of these outside sources. There are billions of dollars out there for the millions of students who are applying for them. But, I just did a report at Lake Forest, and our students who brought in outside scholarships brought in about $4,000 on average. The national average is about $2,500. We see a lot of scholarships that are $500 or $1,000, but we see a lot of scholarships that are $10,000 and $15,000 a year. So I'll get off of my soapbox, but really anything and everything that we can do to encourage students to take advantage of some of these outside scholarships is absolutely worth it, because it's a win-win situation. When we broadly categorize, financial aid, we look at it as either merit-based or need-based. Merit-based has absolutely nothing to do with where the family is coming from financially, and everything to do with what the student brings to the table, what their application for admission looks like, how well they interview, what their test scores look like, if they're required, the essays, the letters of recommendation. At that moment in time, when a college is deciding whether a student is admissible, they're also deciding whether they qualify for any of the merit-based scholarships that come from the college itself, and not just academic-based these days. Almost every college has academic merit-based scholarships, but so many more colleges offer other kind of what I call talent-based scholarships that kind of reward a student for being involved in leadership activities or social justice or green initiatives or the traditional athletics, fine arts. So many different categories out there that a student is automatically considered for, at the time of admission. If there's a scholarship that they're interested in, but they didn't hear anything about it when they got their letter of admission, absolutely talk to the school. Maybe they didn't qualify, or maybe it was just kind of glossed over. I've known of cases in the past where the student didn't go into great detail about their musical ability, but had they might have been considered for a music scholarship. And a lot of the fine arts scholarships out there from a lot of colleges now are not necessarily for those students who are majoring in those areas, but they're more for the non-major students. And then the need-based financial aid. We piggyback on any of the merit-based scholarships by asking you to go through the entire financial aid process, which we'll cover in the next bit, to see if there's anything else that we can do in addition to that scholarship. Here's where the grants kick in, and student loans and the work study. And in some colleges, they will actually increase the amount of the merit-based scholarship based on the financial need of the family. So it may just start off with a $30,000 scholarship, but going through this process, the student may end up with a $40,000 scholarship. To begin to be considered for the merit-based, really, it's just the application for admission. We typically have enough information at that moment in time. And then once you get that response back from the college about the admission letter and the scholarship, if that's enough, if that's what will do it to make that college affordable for you, you do not need to do anything else. That you're absolutely fine to just kind of stop there. Now, I would strongly encourage you to see what else is out there, because there are so many other programs that we don't want you to lose out on. And it really is, kind of a no-brainer. It doesn't, cost anything, and it doesn't really take that much, time out of your life, out of your day to explore all of the different options. And to explore all of the different options, there is a universal application called the Fafsa, the free application for federal student aid. That is the application that every school, every college, every university is requiring of all students, collecting some basic demographic and financial information to get a sense of, to kind of create an index number. Now, here's where it's not actually called an index number. It's actually called an EFC, expected family contribution, but it's not the expected family contribution. It's not a dollar amount. It really acts as more of an index number to get a sense of whether a student qualifies for federal grant or the state grant or something from the college itself. Here's my little aside. 40 years ago, the results of the Fafsa, at that time it was called something else, but was called a Pell Grant Index. 30 years ago, it was called the Student Aid Index. For the last 20 years, it's been called the Expected Family Contribution. I've never referred to it as an expected family contribution. I was actually going back through some of my programs from 20 years ago, and I've always talked about it as an index number. So maybe I'm thinking, maybe the government heard me and said, okay, let's shut up, Jerry. Let's just call it an index number again. I don't think that's the case, but really that's what it acts. And it is going to be called an index number starting in the 24-25 school year. The only place that you can complete the Fafsa is at fafsa.gov. And I say that because there are some lookalike or knockoff sites out there. If you Google Fafsa or free application, you might get to some of the sponsored sites first, but please be very careful with those. They are out there. And they will say, hey, we'll help you fill out the Fafsa for the low fee of only $500. We'll populate the answers for you. You don't need that to happen. It is a very intuitive, very user-friendly form, and has evolved so much over the years, and evolving even more. A little bit of a tease: the Fafsa you fill out this year is going to look dramatically different than the Fafsa you fill out, next year for the 24-25 school year. But fafsa.gov is the online site. There used to be a couple other ways that you could complete the Fafsa, including a mobile app, but nobody was using it. So they kind of just shut that down this summer. Kind of the overview of the Fafsa: it opened on October 1st. That wasn't the deadline by any means. It was just the very first day that you could access it at fafsa.gov. It's 7 steps long. There are seven kind of categories on there. Because you're filling it out now, it's going to reference your income, your most recent income on file with the IRS, so which would be the 21 tax year. Some financial aid offices, or you might see some materials out there that reference this or call it prior year. And the only reason they call it prior is because we're using 21 income to determine eligibility for the student who's starting in the fall of 23. But that, even though it starts with the 21 income, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what we have to use to determine eligibility. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. There is a tool called the IRS Data Retrieval tool that I would strongly encourage every family to use. When you get to that section of the Fafsa, it will allow you to link into the IRS site and just bring in the 5 or 6 line items that we need in the Fafsa off of the hundreds of line items that are on a tax return. You don't have to think about it. You just kind of click some boxes. It pulls just that information in. The flip side of not using the data retrieval tool is that colleges then will see that you did not use it, and so they will follow up with you, which will slow the process down, but they'll ask you for a copy of the tax return just to make sure that those income figures that were reported were the correct ones off of the correct line items as well. Here's another prediction, kind of another tease for the 24-25 school year. The data retrieval tool will not be an option. it'll be automatic. You won't have that option anymore. It'll be an automatic thing. You won't have any choice. Here's the other thing too, and this question's been coming up a lot recently, and absolutely, this is a very secure site. Both the FAFSA and then linking to the IRS site are both very, very secure. Many layers of security have been added over the years where there, knock wood, there has never been a data breach. There's never been a loss of data or identity theft. So please, kind of rest easy as we should be concerned when we're putting in our social security numbers and date of birth and address and phone number. We want to be careful with that information. So please know that this is a very secure site. Kind of a general outline of the FAFSA. There's kind of two sections, two tracks. It asks, the parents some information. It asks the students information. It'll ask about the parents, what their marital status is. It'll ask, how many people are living at home, how many kids you might have in college during the upcoming school year, the age of the parents. And the reason it asks that is because the older the parent, the more of their income is protected for retirement, for later on in life. The income, which you'll link to, when the IRS using the data retrieval tool. It'll ask about some assets, but I'll come back to that in just a little bit. For the students, it'll start by asking some identifying information, name and address, social security number, some demographic information like what high school they attended, if they had any income, how much they had. If it was a tax return, they could also link to the IRS. If they didn't file a tax return, that's fine. It's absolutely fine. There's a little box that says will not file. Also ask about assets that are in the student's name, which are different than assets in the parent's name. And then ask kind of what's called college plans. They'll ask the student where they want this information from the FAFSA sent. You can send this up to really as many schools as you want, as many colleges or universities. Initially, you can only list up to 10 colleges the first time you do this, but then once those 10 receive the results, which typically takes now at this time of year about 72 hours, then you can go back in and add the 11th or 12th or 20th. Or there was a student probably now at least a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, who from South Carolina, who applied to 100 colleges. Imagine all the letters of recommendation counselors had to write for her. She got accepted to 99 out of the 100. We don't know, it wasn't in the story which college did not accept her. But if she were filling out the FAFSA, she would have had to go back in 10 times to add those additional schools. I don't think your kids will be looking at 100 colleges, but if they are looking at more than 10, absolutely it's easy as pie to go back in and to add the additional college. One thing to keep in mind, every college has a unique 6-digit FAFSA code, or federal school ID number. That is what's linked up to that campus, that particular campus. Every campus has a different one. Listing that FAFSA code on the FAFSA is what allows us to draw down the information, so that we can start the conversation, start the eligibility. It's a 6-digit code, specific to that campus, which is very important for some of the larger systems like Wisconsin, for example, where Madison has a different FAFSA code than Whitewater, than La Crosse, than Milwaukee. Or Lake Forest College, our FAFSA code is 001706, for example, 001706. If you were to list Lake Forest on the FAFSA, we would get notice that there is a FAFSA available for us to download into our system. Some of the frequently asked questions that we get about the FAFSA, about the whole process, first have to do with the definition of parents. If parents are married, then both parents' information is required on the FAFSA. If parents are divorced, not remarried, or separated, or even a single parent, it's only the parent that the student lives with or has lived with the most over the last 12 months. That becomes the parent of record for the FAFSA, not the other parent, in the case of separated or divorced. The only difference is that if both biological parents are living together, then but not legally married, both biological parents are required to put their information on the FAFSA. I just talked to a family the other day where both biological parents were living together. They're legally married, but they're going through a separation. They're going through a divorce. That's a special circumstance that we'll talk about in just a little bit, and how you let the school know to take that into consideration. So the parent of record on the FAFSA is what we call the custodial parent. Many schools will not ask anything about the other parent, the non-custodial parent. Some may, but the majority of schools will not take anything, into consideration from the other parent. When we talk about assets, in fact, I'm going to actually skip to the third bullet point here. What's totally ignored on the FAFSA and for many of the colleges is anything to do with home equity. Don't care about it. Anything to do with retirement accounts, the value of retirement accounts, life insurance policies, annuities, those are totally ignored. The only thing that is included, excuse me, allergies. The only thing that is included on the FAFSA is what we like to refer to as cash on hand. So money that you've got in savings or in the stock market or other real estate, money that you could access. The rule of thumb is if there is no severe penalty for early withdrawal, then it is probably considered an asset on the FAFSA, which also includes some of the education savings plans out there, what are called 529 plans. If the parents opened a 529 plan for their child, then it's a parent asset. It is not a child, it's not the kid's asset. If another family member or grandparent opened a 529 plan, that is not considered, on the FAFSA at all. When all is said and done, the eligibility, the FAFSA is more income driven than anything else. With the statistics, only 2% of all FAFSA filers out there have enough assets to start to impact the eligibility for some of the programs that are out there. Enough assets, meaning unless you have like $250,000 or more in savings or stocks or 529 plans, it really won't matter much, with the eligibility. Here's my other prediction. One of my final predictions. No, I think I have more. Probably in another year or two, we're going to see any reference to assets come completely off of the FAFSA because of it's just not worth it. There's just not a lot of savings, and you should be. It should be good to save. You should be able to do that, to use that for college costs. The last bullet point on here is that you're filling out one FAFSA per student. Because it's student specific, if you do have 2 or 3 kids in college, then you're filling out one FAFSA for each of them. The student information is going to be unique on each. The parent information will be exactly the same on each. And there's a nice feature now in the FAFSA that allows you to kind of transfer the parent information from one FAFSA to the next, so you don't have to start from scratch with that. Here's another one of those things, another one of my soapboxes, or no horse too dead to beat kind of things, where special circumstances really, really matter in this process. We want to know anything and everything that you want to tell us, anything that you want to share with us that you think is impacting your finances, your cash flow. So many things that we can take into consideration, whether it looks one way on paper, and here's where I talked about where the 21 income might be one, but the 22 income that you're going to be filing in a few months might be totally different, might be a lot less. We'll take that into account. Or here's the other thing. Really inflation, where the 21 income isn't buying as much as it did, in the 22 year, especially, these months. Kind of a quick aside. I have an insatiable sweet tooth where I love desserts. Once in a while, I'll go and I'm not a big fan of Dunkin' Donuts. Sorry if you guys like that. I like the mom and pop shops, or even some of the, when I'm up in Wisconsin, I'm up there periodically. I stop at the Piggly Wiggly store. They have really good donuts. They're pretty big. Here's the interesting thing is I haven't bought them in a while. I actually just bought a couple today. They're $1.50 each. I swear that it was just a month or two ago where they were like 50 cents each, or maybe they were 75 cents each. But inflation is hitting all of us, including my sweet tooth. And so we recognize that, maybe not my sweet tooth, but we recognize those kinds of circumstances, inflation, income. You have to be able to kind of go into some detail, with us and kind of document it, because we can't make any changes to anything unless we've got some backup, just it's pretty obvious. But whether it's an increase or a decrease in income or healthcare costs or all different kinds of categories that we can take into consideration. Really, in the world of financial aid, there's no such thing as TMI, too much information. We really do want to know anything and everything that's going on so that we can take that into consideration, so that we tailor our response to the family, to the student, with the financial aid eligibility. A couple different ways that we collect these special circumstances, whether there's a common application called the Css Financial Aid Profile. There's about 400 colleges. Those colleges at the very beginning of this, I talked about the Notre Dames, the Claremont McKenna's, the Northwesterns, that will ask you to fill out the CSS profile in addition to the FAFSA. But it's the profile is where you can go into a lot more information. The FAFSA, you cannot color outside the lines or stream of consciousness or anything like that. You can with the profile, or if a school doesn't require the profile, they'll have their own application for financial aid or standalone form. So if you're talking to someone at the college in the financial aid office or the admissions office, and you mentioned that there's a loss of income, they may give you the income change form, or healthcare expenses, that insurance didn't cover, they'll give you the healthcare expense form, or a catch-all form with that your categories like legal expenses or funeral expenses or emergency home repairs. So many things that we can take into consideration before we make that final determination. Here's a screenshot of the CSS profile. And I show this because in the lower left-hand corner there, that link is where you can check the participating schools and scholarships. There are some scholarship organizations that might require the student, the family, to fill out the profile as well. We're trying to figure out how much you need to make it a very affordable, decision. If we're admitting a student, we want them to enroll. And so we know what our costs are. We want to figure out how much you need to choose that particular college, to choose us. So we spend all of our time on this middle button, kind of figuring out a reasonable family contribution from you. The universal philosophy is that this is a partnership. First, we look at the students and parents to be the primary partners, to do whatever they reasonably are able to do to kind of contribute toward the costs. We on the back end are not doing a cash flow analysis or debt to income ratio or making judgment calls as to what kind of cars you drive, but really we're bound by some rules and regulations and formulas, but there is enough gray area where the special circumstances really matter in this. We can take anything and everything into consideration. Throughout this process, communication is vital. We want to make sure that you're on the same page as we are, that you're doing what you need to do when you need to do it. So a good question to ask colleges throughout the process is, how will you specifically as a parent be informed of what is needed and when it's needed, what the deadlines are, what the forms are? And I say that because there are some colleges out there that are very conservative when it comes to FERPA and privacy laws, where they will only communicate with the student unless they have express written consent to include the parent or another party or the non-custodial parent. The clear majority of colleges out there will automatically include the parent in all the communication. But ask, to find out if the student does need to do something else or if it is just an automatic thing. I had a conversation with a family a few months ago, and we talked about communication, and we talked about how, for example, at Lake Forest, I said we automatically carbon copy the parent on all the communication that comes out of our office. And the student was like, carbon copy, what? And I was, yes, that's where the CC colon, little kind of education for them. But that's what we will do. And that's what many colleges will do. They'll automatically include the parent, but please do ask to make sure you're not missing out on anything. We are your advocate, throughout this process. We want to make sure that you're doing everything by those deadlines that I talked about earlier, because when we send the financial aid award letter, make the financial aid offer, we want to make sure that it has everything in there that makes sense to you. Combination of the grants, the scholarships, the student loans, the work study. Cosmetically, I talked about, it can look very different, like those net cost calculators I talked about earlier. Even financial aid award letters can look very different from school to school. I've seen some where it's been very difficult for me to decipher them. So not only how the financial aid offer is presented, but what makes up the financial aid package. How much of it is gift aid? How much of it is student loans and work study? Any given year, it can be very different from school to school, depending a lot of times on the school and how it builds its freshman class, what its needs are. If it needs more musicians any given year, it may offer many more music scholarships than it ever did before. There are some colleges that need females in the natural sciences, and so they will only have scholarships for female students who are majoring in biology and chemistry, and physics. So it can be a little different that way, depending on how the class is building at the college and how much, quite honestly, that they want your student and what he or she brings to the table. You can expect to receive the same amount of financial aid for all 4 years or 5 years. And another good question to ask, is there an expiration date on some of the scholarships or some of the financial aid that's offered to the student? Is it limited to 4 years? Is it extended to 5 if it takes them a little bit longer? And really, unless there's a huge change in circumstances for the better in your situation, you can expect to receive the same amount of financial assistance all 4 years. Colleges will not blindside you. They'll do everything in their power so that what a 4-year cost of education, will be. It has to be something extreme, and I was just thinking, because I just read this article not too long ago. This past summer, there was the Powerball where the jackpot was a little over $1 billion. One winning ticket bought it, like that quick trip in Des Plaines. It wasn't me, but that person finally came forward. They're remaining anonymous. But if that family were applying for need-based financial aid in subsequent years, they may not get as much. The college may give them a building with their name on it or endow a scholarship. But I say really, and I don't mean to be glib, but it really has to be something extreme like that for a college to lower any of the financial aid it gives to you. Kind of as an aside, I was driving down 294 the other day, and I saw the billboard for the Powerball, and the jackpot was like $325 million. And I thought, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for it to increase because I'm feeling lucky. We'll see. There is an initiative to have a common financial aid award letter out there, because I talked about how they can look very different from school to school. Many of them will continue to look very different, but the essence of the award letter will be the same. It will tell you what the costs are. It'll differentiate the gift aid from the student loans and the work study. It'll tell you what the net price or what the net cost is. Go into detail about loan options for the students or work study options for the student. Other options for the parents, payment plans, the federal parent loan, other alternative loans that are out there. Here's where it also kind of capitalizes on the phrase a lot of schools are using now, the ROI, return on investment. Here's where colleges can toot their own horn and say, this is why you should choose us. Our graduation rate after 4 years is 95%. Our student loan default rate is 0.001%, or our average earnings for a student is $70,000 or $75,000. So a lot of the information you see on the Navigator and the Scorecard, you'll also see embedded in the financial aid award letter itself to make a good educated consumer decision. A couple different places online that you can get help. If you want to do that with the award letters out there, finaid.org, ISAC, State of Illinois website, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You need to do a little bit of work by plugging in the information from some of these award letters, but then it really does compare apples to apples, the percentage of the package that gift aid is making up as opposed to the self-help, the student loans, the work study. Throughout this process, deadlines are huge. We want to make sure that you're not missing out on anything, not only for admission or the financial aid process or the outside scholarships out there. Here's where we've gone away from those priority or soft deadlines to more of the drop dead date. So do something, to kind of have a list of all the different deadlines that are out there. And a good rule of thumb, if at all possible, is looking at all the different schools. Whoever has the earliest deadline for anything and everything, try to get everything done by that earliest deadline for all of the colleges. That way you're not doing one thing for one college one week, the next week you're focusing on another college. If at all possible, that might make your lives a whole lot easier. A quick timeline: to access the FAFSA, you need a username and password. The student needs one and the parent needs one. That's what allows you to get into the FAFSA, and that's what allows you to use the data retrieval tool, and it allows you to use your it's called the Federal Student Aid ID. That's what allows you to use those usernames and passwords to sign the form electronically. If you're filling it out now, or the profile, if a school is requiring the profile, they both opened up on October 1st. Check if there's other forms out there for the special circumstances, get the financial aid award letter, and ask us questions. The FAFSA used to open in January, so it was a lot more of a crunch time for us to be able to kind of talk to families, to gather this information before they made a decision. I like that it opens in October now because excuse me, it syncs up with the admission process and gives us a lot more time for relaxed conversations. One of the drop dead dates still out there is the national candidate reply date, May 1. By May 1, a student needs to accept an offer of admission, accept an offer of financial aid. For many colleges, after May 1, all bets are off. Students can absolutely commit well before May 1, and we love when they commit before May 1. And May 1 seems so long ago, or so long, far away, from now, but really time flies, and we want to make sure you're getting everything done and taking advantage of all the programs out there so that when it does come time to make the decision, for all the different variables out there, you've made the very best decision that you possibly can. Lots of places that you can get help, not only at the schools, the college's financial aid office, a couple of these websites. The Federal Student Aid has its own YouTube channel. The best, kind of YouTube video they have is how to create your Federal Student Aid ID to get into the FAFSA. I feel like I've talked a lot and I wanted to get through a lot and I wanted to kind of keep us on time. So I'm kind of looking at, kind of run over a little bit. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, because now I want to know kind of what's important to you and kind of take any kind of questions that you have. So while I take a sip of water.
Thanks, Jerry. That was awesome. And we do have some questions for you. So I'm glad you took a drink of water. So I'm trying to group them together so that it makes sense. But I don't know if I'll be savvy enough to do that. One of the questions we have has to do with, and a couple questions actually had to do with 529 savings accounts. And so I think there were a couple questions about, like, what if you have 3 different accounts because you have 3 different children? What does that look like when you're reporting on the FAFSA?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that's very typical. There'll usually be several different accounts for the different students. They're all lumped together. So because it's the parent that owns that, they will lump all of the amounts of all those 529 plans together and report that as an asset on the FAFSA.
Great. Erin and Bianca, jump in if you saw one that while I'm scrolling.
Sure. On the 529 note, Jerry, I think we wanted clarification or just confirmation that if the grandparent has the fund, it is not considered a family asset. So it's kind of a safe place for that financing support.
Yes, safe place, smart choice. Yes, it's totally ignored.
We've got one more to answer live, veering a little bit. A parent asked, would it be wise to reduce what my company pays me to from 2022-23 and instead draw down our cash on hand? And it's, would financial aid offerings differ if I show cash on hand of 100K versus 20K? So there's some specifics there, but.
Yeah, so the essence of the question is, put yourself, try to make yourself in a more financially needy kind of situation. I'd be less than honest if I didn't say that, sure, I mean, if that's a possibility for you, I mean, the college will base the financial aid offer and even the federal eligibility on income, not if it's 21, the calendar year of 21, or 22, what that looks like, or even in some cases, the 23, 24, kind of a 12-month period of time. They'll look at that. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, if it's less income and you're drawing down your cash on hand, if that's, yeah, it's possible. I don't want to, I'm hemming and hawing a little bit, but yes.
It's very nuanced and specific,
Yes.
and it's almost like, yes, so okay, I think we've
Yes.
covered it. If the,
And sometimes in those cases too, I say if you have a financial advisor, that might be a question that's better suited to a financial advisor.
Yes, absolutely. Of which I know.
We have some logistical questions that even I can answer, I think. So one of the questions was if both parents and students fill out the FAFSA, and Jerry, let me know if there's a better way to explain this, but both the student needs to start the FAFSA. Okay, they're going to enter in the information about themselves, and then the parent at some point is going to be asked to log in with their own specific FSA ID and enter in the financial information, and perhaps do that like DRT, the data retrieval tool. Is that a fair explanation? Do you want to?
Yeah, so the student logs in to the FAFSA, you know, they can plug in their information. If they wanted to, while they're logged in, they can just say, okay, mom and dad, if you want to kind of plug in your information now, you know, they could do that, or they could log out, save it, and the parent can log in as the parent, you know, on behalf of the student. So it'll ask a lot of information about the student and their identifying information. But yeah, and you can save it, you know, as many times as you want and go back in, and you don't have to do it all in one sitting. So yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jerry, we had a family ask if a family has an Illinois-based college savings plan, can the funds be used if the student chooses to go to an out-of-state school?
Yes. Any of the 529 plans, and under the umbrella 529, there's either the education savings or the prepaid tuition plans. Any of them can be used anywhere. So if you have College Illinois, you know, for example, and they don't go to U of I, you can absolutely use that at a private college or an out-of-state college. It's whatever you put into it, the value of it, that's the value that will be applied toward the costs.
Thank you.
Okay, some of these are going to be quick answer questions too, so like rapid fire.
Okay.
One of the questions is if parents got their education outside of the US, what do they list for their parents' highest level of study?
So if it's considered,
Equivalent?
yeah, the equivalent. If it's considered college, then college.
Okay. And then there was a question also, and this I think has been asked of a lot of counselors more recently about you know, receiving your financial aid package and maybe comparing it with some of the ones you got from other institutions, and you know, does it ever work to disclose or to ask for more money? And I can share after you like how I advise families, but if you want to speak to it from the university perspective.
Sure. We can't ask for that information, but families can share that with us. Depending on the college, we may or may not do anything with it. You know, we may say we might consider you for additional funding, but we have to wait until March or April to see how the class is building. So you're absolutely welcome to share that information with us. Some schools may say, thank you, no. Others may say, okay, we'll match that offer.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, essentially what I tell families is that, you know, you can certainly ask, and they may say, we don't do that, but they may be able to find like another 1,000 or two. And there is a document that we have circulating in our little cohort of post-secondary counselors with some tips for that. And usually that type of like discussion with the financial aid office comes later in the process, after you have multiple financial aid award letters that you're looking at. And so I know personally, I send out that information at a later date. Let's see here.
I think we had one about resources and websites to find outside scholarships. You shared that on a slide. I just want to reassure everyone that we're recording. We'll be able to share the slides. So, and we've been keeping track of all the great websites Jerry's shared tonight. So we'll be putting together kind of comprehensive feedback notes for you after this evening.
Jerry, for parents' marital status, I know it asks the student, from the student perspective, like if their parents are married, divorced, etc. How do I also know that it eventually gets to the point where they have to report whether the parents are like their current marital status, like if their parents are divorced and then, you know, the parents are remarried. I don't remember how that what that looks like on the FAFSA. I know that they get that information. Do you happen to know?
Yeah, so there's a category when it talks about the parent's marital status, it will say divorced, not remarried, separated, widowed, legal, single parent, or remarried. They'll actually say married or remarried.
Great. And that one of the questions that followed that was just, if you have a step parent, do they fill out the FAFSA form as well? And how would you answer that?
Yes, so their information is included. So when you talk about the parents, you're talking about the parent and the step parent. Yep.
Thank you.
One quick one, Jerry. We had a question about the Fafsa codes, and I just want to confirm, as you're filling out the Fafsa, there's an easy database. The website makes it really simple to find your code. So I just want to.
Yeah, you embed it in the FAFSA. You kind of start typing in the name of the school, Lake Forest College 001706. No, that you'll see the search, the database in there.
And we had kind of a combo. This might have been addressed while I'm trying to manage some questions, but I think this relates to kind of that extra info you can share with financial aid offices, but parents addressing their own student loans that they're still managing as far as that family debt level. And then linked to that kind of is, does FAFSA consider the cost of like private school tuition for younger siblings, or would either or both of those be something to call and make sure offices are aware of?
Yes, all of the above. If parents have loans under their name, or if parents are in college, that can be taken into account, or private school tuition. Yep.
Thank you.
We've had some questions about FAFSA deadlines, and there is no necessarily like deadline. It's just a matter of when the funds run out, especially for Illinois grant funds, which has been lately, maybe as early as March, April. So I think we advise families to get it done sooner as opposed to later. I always say if you can get it done before Thanksgiving, that's great. And there is also another document called the Css Profile that only certain schools utilize. And what you need to know about like deadlines for that would be on each college's website. If they want the FAFSA and the Css Profile by a certain date, you're going to need to get that information from each individual college.
Becky, that's a good point, because we also, our rule of thumb is if you get this done by Thanksgiving, you're golden, for any of the colleges that are out there. Yep.
Quickly, I think we have some question about the process, and it is okay to be applying to schools and completing the FAFSA. So if your student has their list confirmed, they're still working on apps, they're hitting those 11/1 deadlines, yay. You could do the FAFSA yesterday and an application can get submitted tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Totally separate processes.
Mhm. Yes, and I would say there's a lot of questions that are a little bit more specific that I don't think we'll throw out to this large group, but I just want to encourage everyone, and you guys have been wonderful. Our participants have like stayed the course with us here. Jerry, your expertise. But I would just encourage, if there are very specific questions, have your students start with one of the three of us. And if we aren't able to answer it, we will connect your student with someone who can. So you're definitely not in this alone. I know that all three high schools have upcoming FAFSA completion workshops, which means that the state of Illinois has staff that are FAFSA experts on hand at these events to answer and help families actually complete their FAFSA. So whereas Jerry gave us a very nice presentation and gave us the overview, this is more like work on your individual FAFSA and just get it done and ask the questions while you can. And so we all plan on sending a recording of this lovely presentation to our families, and we will remind families of when those events are coming up, along with, like Aaron said, some of the websites that Jerry referenced throughout his presentation. Jerry, are we going to be able to get your slides?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I tweaked one of them today, actually. So I'll forward that to all of you if you want.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, we are at 7:38. Bianca and Aaron, is there any question that we should, like a repetitive question, like a common one?
One question that we often get is, if you completed the FAFSA and submitted it, are you able to go back and make edits?
Yes, absolutely. You can make changes
Right.
anytime. Yeah.
All right. Well, Jerry, you're the best. Thank you so much for doing this for our families and for us. I mean, I was like taking notes while you were presenting, because it's just like there's always new stuff to learn. So everyone, thank you for joining us. Like I said, we will be getting this out as soon as the recording can be processed and uploaded, and once we can get a hold of Jerry's slides. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great night. Jerry, thanks again. I'm going to go ahead and sign us off here in a minute, but I want to make sure to say thanks.
I just want to, good luck, everyone. It'll be an exciting process. I can't wait for you guys to start getting offers and ask questions of the colleges and stuff. So, yeah.
Right.
So
Thanks.
thank
Good
you.
night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Jerry.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Nice seeing
you.
you. Bye.
Bye.